All right, we're going to talk a little bit about embedded quotes and the art of embedding a quote, placing a quote inside your own sentence. Young writers tend to struggle with using direct quotes. Many times they simply find a quote that suits their purposes, and then they just plug it right into the paper as an additional sentence. Now, you should work to embed the quote within your own sentence so that the quote or part of the quote and your words all share the same period, the same sentence. Why? Well, the first one is flow. Oftentimes when you don't embed a quote, all of a sudden it's clunky, it doesn't sound right, it sounds like two different authors, and you want to try desperately to sound as if everything was written by one person. Additionally, and probably just as important, more importantly perhaps, is context. Giving the quote context. Who said it? When was it said? Why was it said? How does it affect what was said earlier or what's going to be said next? By embedding your quote, leading into it or leading out of it or both, you help to create context. So for example, let's look at a quote that needs improvement from a novel you're going to read later this semester, The Lord of the Flies. William Golding's book, Lord of the Flies, is about kids stranded on an island. Some of the kids are good and some are bad. Roger, with a sense of delirious abandonment, leaned all his weight on the lever. Golding, 180, in parentheses. So the question is, what causes irresponsible behavior? Ralph is good, but Jack is bad. Huh? What? No context. And it sounds clunky as all heck. I have no idea who Roger is. I don't know Ralph and Jack and whatever. Some improvement is needed. There is room for improvement. There are bad kids on the island. One of them is Roger. Ooh, context. He drops a boulder on Piggy and kills him. Roger, with a sense of delirious abandonment, leaned all his weight on the lever. This causes Piggy's death. We have much more context in this, but it's still clunky. It still has no flow into the quote. It still sounds like two different writers. It doesn't sound like one person wrote this because it doesn't flow at this point into it. So let's look at one possible revision. In The Lord of the Flies, the truest form of wickedness on the island is evident in Roger. He demonstrates his true depravity when, quote, with a sense of delirious abandonment, he leaned all his weight on the lever. Well aware of Piggy's place beneath him, Roger willingly takes Piggy's life. If you close your eyes as I read it, it almost sounds like, it does sound like all of this was written by one person, even though you are sharing this period, this sentence, with Mr. Golding. Another possible revision, Roger's murder of Piggy. Close your eyes and listen to this. Roger's murder of Piggy clearly illustrates the depths children can sink to without appropriate behavior. As he stood high above Piggy on the mountain, Roger, with a sense of delirious abandonment, leaned all his weight on the lever. Wow, that sounds like one person wrote it. His willingness to welcome the moment with delirious abandonment clearly demonstrates the level of pleasure that Roger received by committing this horrific act. We have flow, we have context, works so much better than if you look back at the first and the second ones, so much better. This is what you're going to try to do with your quotes. If an essay is referencing a single work that you have identified in your introduction, all you need is the appropriate page number or line number following the quote. As a gift, the gold hilt was handed to the old lord, a relic from long ago, for the venerable ruler. And then we have our parenthetical that tells us either the page number or the line number. As a gift gives us context about what this is. And of course, period afterward. When referencing more than one work in your essay, and you will have more than one work, you must list the first word, often the author's last name, when known, from the works cited page, entry followed by the page number or the line number. So for example, most writers during the Romantic period viewed mankind as, quote, naturally good, but corrupted by society. We have our author's last name, and then the page number, and parentheses, period. Mary Shelley certainly shared that view and illustrates it in Frankenstein. The creature even describes himself as a, quote, fallen angel driven from society because of prejudices. Then we have the author's last name, author Frankenstein, the page number where this is found, and period. Now note, this should go right after this. And since it doesn't, it tells me that this must have been a paraphrase of some of the information that was found on page 84 in the novella. Alrighty, so some other things to remember. Always, periods always follow your in parentheses, if that's where the idea is. You don't put the period inside the quote. It goes after the parenthesis if the sentence is going to end there. Embedded quotes should usually be short and to the point, generally maybe 2 or 3 lines at most. You don't want to go to a parentheses, or you don't want to go to an embedded quote or a quote that's 4 lines or 5 lines. Too much information. Summarize. Take out what is most important. Don't give me too many words. The more words we read, the weaker your argument is. Long is not always good. Concise is better. If an embedded quote is longer than 4 lines, you have to format it differently, which is a lot more work for you, so just be aware of that. If the quotes are sequential, but not used in their entirety, use that ellipse to identify the omission. So the creature even describes himself as a creature with an accumulation of anguish, ellipse, a fallen angel who is forced into seclusion. Notice the comma before, comma after. Notice that this tells me there was something else in the quote that I just didn't utilize. And this tells me the page numbers, that it went from page 83 on to page 84, and my period is afterwards. If you change or add something, you saw I did that earlier in one of my examples, you need to have a bracket to let me know. You might do that to add context. The creature even describes himself as a, comma, quote, fallen angel, and with an accumulation of anguish. In his seclusion, and then I have my page number, but this would add context, and you notice I did that with, I put it in brackets, a he in one of my examples earlier. The mark of a good embedded quote is that when you read it aloud to someone, and he or she won't notice when your words end and when the quote begins, and that's what you want to do. When embedding quotes, make sure you use the quotes. Make sure your use of the quotes always lines up with the author's intent. In other words, don't manipulate the quote to change the meaning. We see this in the news all the time. Sound bites, you can make them sound like anything. Make your embedded quote sound like what the idea is. Don't change the meaning of it. Don't manipulate it. Alrighty? So hopefully you understand this concept. We will play around with this a little bit the next time we meet. Bye-bye.